Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we're going to be looking at some of the devblogs which have come out about the Dagor Engine 5, and also some of my preliminary thoughts on the engine itself, how it's going to affect the game, but mainly why it may temper expectations for update 1.77, which is going to be the next major updates that War Thunder has. But first things first, it is Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day to you all. And if you are not busy or if you have no plans, well, in War Thunder you can get yourself some pretty cool decals. I have a few of these, like I have this one, I believe this one and this one, but I'd love to get the Misbehavin' one. And basically what you have to do is a Valentine's Day trophy will be granted for 3 victories in a row with an activity of 60% or more, and will contain one of the following decals. So it's kind of random if you've never got any before, but it is how it is, unfortunately. There's also some other stuff. So if you want some Golden Eagles, there are 10 prize places for this contest that they're running. You can also get 1000 GE for first place, and this is pretty much to do with making a decal, I suppose is what you would call it. Here are some examples. Pretty much you put some of your favorite pictures in, this War Thunder PNG that they've created, and whoever gets first gets a nice bunch of GE, and even 10th place gets 100 GE, and mainly access to naval forces, which I think is the bigger buy here. So if you want access to naval forces, maybe you're really interested in getting hold of those ships before they come to OBT, this would be one of your chances to do that, because I don't think the competition is going to be that steep. And then they give you a general outline of how to do this. And I think instead of doing one picture of War Thunder and one picture, both pictures of War Thunder, I think it would be much more interesting if you did like a funny face and then a tank, but I don't know whether they allow that. But I think that would be better, like maybe somebody doing a heart picture, and then on the other side, like doing a specific tank in a situation or something. Maybe like one of the memes, like maybe the upside down Churchill. Something like that, which people would enjoy. But yeah, also you can, if you don't want to play or you don't have time today to play, you can also purchase the stuff in the Valentine's Day trophy in the in-game items shop. So yeah, you can do that too. I think some of these are definitely worth it. Pretty much the Misbehavin' one is one of the better ones. The Cupid one is very well detailed, but the rest are definitely at a lower standard than these two here. Maybe the Hearts and Spitfire is one that you may like. I like it too, but I think the other 5 are definitely lower par compared to these two. But anyway, let's get into the main thing of the video. So over the last few weeks or so, we've had some devblogs, which are mainly based around the Dagor Engine 5.0. Now, we currently, in War Thunder, are running on the Dagor Engine 4.0, or some variant of the Dagor Engine 4. So this is the next massive upgrade from what we have had before. Now, I don't think it's actually been that long ago that we actually have had the Dagor Engine 4 come out, so it is kind of nice to see that they're working on it at a very swift rate, because the thing is, when it comes to War Thunder in general, the looks is definitely a selling point to a lot of people. There are many content creators out there who make historical and realistic content when it comes to, little mini-movies and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the best ways to promote War Thunder in general, making these small movies. If you want an example of this, a guy who stopped making them, but I hope he comes back, is Heichi, or however you say it. It's Haechi. Look him up on YouTube. He makes wonderful movies, and hopefully one day he will come back to the community to make some. But generally, with those types of movies, has to come a set of videos which look hyper-realistic. And a lot of people using post-effects settings have been able to get those hyper-realistic scenarios, but there are still some issues with it. I find it with my content as well, even though mine isn't generally based on the game looking great, I still run it on max, I still run it with some post-effects settings, but you can still see there's some issues with it when it comes to specific trees or outlines of specific vehicles. And for me, what I hope is that the Dagor Engine 5 actually addresses some of these. And the one to start with is Temporal Anti-Aliasing, which was the first devblog that came out on the 7th, so a week ago. And this seems to be one which is designed to address some of these issues. Now the thing is, the first thing to let you know is if you have a lower end PC, this one, the Temporal Anti-Aliasing, is completely optional, so you can turn it off in the settings. If you go to the War Thunder launcher and you go to settings, you will see that there is already stuff like FXAA there, and I believe FXA as well. These are already in the game and they are options. You can turn them on, you can turn them off. I personally turn them off, not because of a performance thing, but I think it is a downgrade for when you're actually trying to spot tanks. And since my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, sometimes I need all the help I can get, especially at the higher graphical settings. So if you compare it, it may not seem like a large upgrade if you have this slider here. All the links will be in the description, by the way, if you want to play around with some of these interesting gadgets. But what you will basically see is a slightly higher definition. The best place to have a look at it is if you look at this zoomed in picture. Basically what you see is more pristine bricks in the building itself, and also the window. There is less pixels, I think, is the best way to talk about it. There is much more smoother, well, pixels is the wrong word, because the way that this works is it pretty much just increases the smoothness of different pixels compared to where they are. So if you have something using TAA, then it's going to look smoother than it is an FXAA. Now, obviously, from a gameplay point of view, this is probably not great, especially with a lot of people using bushes, a lot of people using camouflage, but from a pure video making point of view, and also if you're one of those people who really likes the look of the game and loves playing on, you know, movie settings with your monster rig, then this is the stuff for you. You will absolutely adore this. So this is just a straight upgrade over the stuff that we had before, and at the same time, it is completely optional. So this isn't something that you have to use, because it is an option in the menu. So if you're talking about gameplay performance, like FPS-wise, this shouldn't really make a massive difference unless the Dagor Engine 5.0 overall runs worse on older machines. But Gaijin has been very sympathetic to older machines when it has come to the being able to run War Thunder on it. I can still run War Thunder on my laptop, which is about 6 years old. Its cooling system has died. I can still run it at 20 FPS, and which is insane to me. Like, that should not happen, but it is still possible. And if you want to read more about how FXAA works and MSAA, they actually do give a nice little thing here, which is nice. But understand, this is all optional. It just makes the game look a lot smoother and a lot nicer. What I want to know is they don't really give us a lot of movement. When we look at these two pictures, the only differences I see between them is basically if you look around the edge of, I believe this is an M48 or an M60, I'm not exactly sure. But the main thing is that I want to see this tank moving with TAA in motion. Because with FXAA and MSAA, that's when you really realize the difference between not having it on and having it on. When you have it on, everything looks a hell of a lot smoother than if you don't. I want to see the movement with TAA if that is what happens as well. So the next one, let's just scroll up a little bit. This is the Dagor Engine 5.0 Displacement Mapping Mud and Puddles. So now we're getting into a few more technical things instead of just an improvement on the smoothness of how the game looks, which is very important. Like, it's one of those key things which makes a massive difference. But here we have displacement mapping, mud, and puddles. So these are physical effects that players are going to notice a hell of a lot more than stuff like the TAA. So if we have a look at it being on and then off, once again, you can use this slider for yourself. You can see that they've kind of added a layer of ground which can be malleable to your tracks. This is something that was added a very long time ago. When on higher settings, what would happen is if you went through mud, you would create lines of tracks. But it seems like they've expanded on that concept with this, which I think is kind of interesting. So if we look at the mud and puddles, they do give a short demonstration, and it's pretty much, it shows the puddles everywhere, and you can go through them, you can shoot them. It still looks kind of basic, but the main thing is that the puddles themselves look mapped to the exact area that they show, and when you shoot it with a machine gun as shown here, it only affects the puddles, it does not affect the ground itself. So that to me shows an area of precision, which is really nice to see. Now once again, is this an upgrade for gameplay? Like, will this give you an advantage? No, it won't. It will actually probably give you a disadvantage. But the thing is, sometimes it's nice for the game to look cool. When the Dagor Engine 4 came out, a lot of people were talking about, well, with these new upgrades, how is it going to affect performance and yada yada, and also at the same time, like, what happens, does this give gameplay advantages, does this give gameplay disadvantages? For me, sometimes I just like the game to look better, and when I'm playing it, if the shadows are better, if the puddles are existent, since they are pretty much non-existent now, if there's a lot more going on the ground, for me, making videos is a lot more interesting. It may be not that important to a lot of people from an aesthetic point of view, but for me it is. One of the only issues I have is looking at this video. If you have a look here, I know it's paused and you can't really see it because of this, but you can see how this is kicking up dirt. This is something that happens a lot in War Thunder. You can see it there. There isn't really water being kicked up there. There's just mud and dirt. And I understand that mud and dirt would be kicked up in this scenario, but there would also be some water splashing around. And it seems like that is not happening in this, which is kind of a shame. Maybe that will be an improvement to the future. But also, instead of just looking at the machine gun and how that does, the tracks also go over it and create some waves. So that's really nice. Yeah, they're basically just taking what they had from the water mechanics already in the larger areas and putting them in the form of mud and puddles around the place. Now, whether this will affect when it comes to, what would be the word? The only effect it would have in gameplay in general is that the puddles themselves would slow down the tank that you're on, because obviously this doesn't affect air at all. Now, I don't know whether it will or not. My general belief is that it won't, because the puddles are not going to be that large, and it's pretty much just going to be another nice little addition to the game to make it look even better. So there will be new effects for mud puddles in the game. Any puddles will appear depending on the terrain and weather type. Sometimes the water will also appear in the track ruts. Puddled water has its own reflections for the surrounding object and also reacts to nearby shots and passing heavy vehicles. How cool is that? So let's set the scene, right? This used to happen with other reflections in the game, but now you can do it on maps. And I wonder if you set up a map in a specific way, so maybe if you set up a custom battle that it's just finished raining or something, I don't know whether that will be something that you can do, but what you could do is set it up so there's water all over the map. And think about it from a Squire's point of view, or think about it from Heiichi's point of view, or anyone who makes those really fun little movies, or montages, or little comedic skits. what you could do is you could set up the camera looking at the water, and what you see out of the water is the tanks going by. Now, this is a film trick that has been used in many films, not just obviously for tanks, but for many things. And this could be something that is integrated into War Thunder filmmaking. And that, to me, is really cool. Like, I think that is awesome. That is something that should really be expanded upon in the future. Now, obviously, it really depends on how the reflections work. It really depends on how all that stuff works. Like, does it look good? Is it more pixelated? All of this stuff, because that was an issue we had with reflections for a long time. But on the maximum graphics, I'm guessing that won't be that much of an issue. But if it is, then obviously what I'm talking about will not happen. But hopefully at some point that is something that we see in the future. We see content creators and filmmakers use this in a very positive way. Also, the mud itself will be different depending on the weather, from dry to dusty to slushy. Right now, we pretty much just have one set of mud. Actually, no, there's two. There's snow and then there's mud. And they act in a very similar way. So it's nice to see, depending on how dry the map is. It will change how the mud reacts. The question is, as always is will this affect performance? Because when stuff like the when the Dagor 4 engine came out, and when we started getting tire tracks, and when we started getting stuff like that, we saw that a lot of lower end users had obviously the graphics turned down, and they couldn't really see the tracks themselves. And what happened here is that the guys who had a higher graphical setting, even on medium, had a direct advantage, because they could see, especially in Simulator, where specific tanks went compared to the minimum players. So therefore, I want to see if this is available for everyone, or whether this is you have to be running on high or higher, or medium or higher, to be able to see these effects. When it comes to performance, I don't think, or I don't believe, after doing some preliminary research into the engine, that this should affect performance at all, really, when it comes down to it. Maybe in the first few weeks, when there's a few little tweaks that have to be made, just like the Dagor 4 one, where there are specific things that tank FPS, they will have to be changed, but overall it shouldn't affect performance. Next, we have another picture just talking about the mud and the water, so you can see the biggest difference. So this looks kind of bland, right? There's not really a lot going on, there's a few shadows. Of course, they haven't added in any post-effects settings to make it look any better, because they want to make it as high graphics as possible, but not make it look great. So, you know, they haven't used the post-effects settings to make the colors look a bit more contrasty and make the shadows pop out a bit better. But if we go to the other slide, they haven't done the post-effects stuff at all, but what they have done is they've added the water, and they've added the puddles, and to me that just looks really nice. And I hope that when I go along here, there's going to be water spraying out of the side. That would be just a nice little change. It obviously doesn't affect gameplay, it's just really interesting. And I wonder if it's going to make sounds as well, because if it makes sounds, then simulator battles and realistic battles take a new what's the word? Like there's an extra layer of skill to it now. That's instead of just listening for engines, you can also listen to water splashes and stuff like that. So that's a little thing that may be interesting to think about. Now we have an extension onto it. So maybe you're thinking, how does that water get there? Obviously the water creates the mud, but how does the water get there in the first place? We have a lot of, we have rain mechanics already in the game, but generally what you find with them is they are really, they cloud your vision. Let's just say it's much more hazy than anything else. It doesn't actually look like rain. So now what we have is new rain, fog, cloud, and sun effects. Something that people have been talking about for a very long time is that they're not happy with the sun in ground forces, where sometimes it just decides that it's coming from Odin's ass and it's just blazing on the battlefield, and you can't see what's going on. Now, hopefully, with the Dagor 5, this is addressed by the changes in the sun, but right now we have improved rain effects. Now, I'm going to leave the rain on because I like the sound of it, and generally it looks really nice. It doesn't seem to cloud the screen too much. The main thing it seems to actually touch is the puddles, and that's what you want. The issue with rain in War Thunder right now is the fact that it just takes up too much screen space when it's actually raining. So seeing enemies can actually be really hard to do. And look how big that damn puddle is. That's a hell of a puddle. Yeah, it takes up too much screen time when it's actually raining, meaning that when you're in an aircraft or when you're in a tank, it isn't really great to have it on a rain map. You can't really see anything. Now, in this sense, in the Dagor 5, it seems that more of the action of the rain is actually happening on the ground. Like if we just play it again, but slow it down a little bit for you. So we just put it to 0.5, we'll turn off the music so it doesn't sound weird. What you can see is little droplets in the actual puddles themselves. So all of the action in that is happening in the puddles and not in and around the tank itself, which to me is great. Now, hopefully, this we still have environmental effects, and it seems like we are with the rain, fogs, clouds, and sun. Hopefully, the fogs and clouds still play a part. I hope it doesn't get too crazy with the fog, because I've seen a few games do that, where literally it's like I can't see 10 meters in front of me. What the hell am I supposed to do? But generally, fog isn't something that really affects games that much. I just hope they don't go overboard with the fog, kind of like how they did with clouds when the Dagor 4 engine came out. But just focusing on rain, I really like the fact that they've made it so it affects the puddles a lot, but not the general environments. I mean, yes, you can see it on the buildings and stuff, but what I mean is actual visibility of the player, because that was the biggest issue with rain that we had before. So layered fog is a thing. Layered fog actually exists in real life, and it's basically this idea that if you sit on a hill in an early morning, if you've ever actually, gone hiking, or maybe you live on a hill and you look down it, or maybe just one day you decided to climb a mountain and pitch a tent on it and wake up, what you will see is haze on the rolling hills. So each divot, or each valley, depending on where you're from, has a layer of fog in it, and as time goes on, that layer of fog rises and goes up. So because of that, what you end up having is this kind of layered fog idea, where you have one set of fog here, one set of fog there, and sometimes they overlap, creating a double fog, which is probably the best way to talk about it. And this is pretty much what they're doing in update 1.77 when it comes to this. What is also interesting is they don't just talk about fog here, they also talk about smoke effects. And with the addition of smoke shells, of smoke grenades, of all of this stuff, is that affected by this? Now, obviously, smoke in game is already incredibly dense. The fact that you can't really see through it at all. One of the issues with it, though, is when you machine gun an enemy, sometimes their outline comes out, or sometimes when the enemy fires, you can see a faint outline of where they are. If you have a double layered smoke effect, will that be able to cover up that tank? So that is just something to think about. Now, they do have some nice pictures here. This one doesn't really show anything. I don't know why they showed this one. Once again, this one doesn't really either, apart from the idea that layered fog is like, it's, you have more visibility close, but as you go further away, it becomes more hazy. This is probably the best example of it, where up close you can see the bunker quite clearly, but as you go along the sea wall and look over here, you can see that the fog slowly gets thicker and thicker as you go along. That is something that isn't really present in War Thunder right now. What you have is more just a block of fog at a certain distance. And this is another great example of it, where if you look close, you can easily and define the trees really well, but as you go along, it just gets a bit more hazy, which is pretty much what happens in real life. As I said, if you've ever sat on a hill early in the morning, you will see this gradual effect, and it is a beautiful effect. I would really like somebody to do a stop motion of this, so get a camera, set it at like minute intervals or something, and just take pictures over a few hours just to see how the fog moves, because that to me is really cool art. But anyway, yeah, that is something to think about. What I want to know is in these screenshots if they also have stuff like the TAA running, because for me, if they do, there doesn't seem to be that much of an upgrade. And if they don't, then the question is why. They obviously don't want to run post-FX settings because they want it to be as vanilla as possible, but it just seems odd. Maybe that's just me being a little bit pessimistic. As I said, the biggest thing about TAA is when they're actually on the move. That's when it's going to really come into play to see the difference between FXAA and MSAA. So yeah, that's just something to think about. And now, we have dynamic clouds and sun. One of the big criticisms that a lot of people had, including myself, of when the Dagor 4 came out, is the clouds look like they were a painting. And this is interesting from maybe a cinematic point of view, if you want to make a specific type of video. But the thing is, in realism, if you look at the realism point of view, or the historical point of view, then they didn't look like paintings. Clouds do not look like they do in paintings. So it looks like this is being addressed in this video here. I really hope it is, and it's not just the sun being addressed, but it seems to be mainly about the sun. What is going to be interesting is to see if we get, like, enduring confrontation where the sun moves more and all of this. But the main thing for me is the clouds. And the clouds in this picture here do look better than the ones we have in game right now, but it really depends. Like, I'm going to have to see these up close, because I thought the clouds in the Dagor 4 engine, when they released that, looked really good, and then when I actually got into the game, I was like, yeah, this is really cinematic. Like, I feel like I am in a painting. I feel like I'm in one of those old war movies where they had to, you know, touch it up a little bit. But I do not feel like I'm in World War II. And at the end of the day, War Thunder is supposed to be a realistic simulator which puts you in the boots of somebody in World War II, or at least that's how I've always seen it. So realism has been the main point when it comes to the graphical ideas that I want to see the game going in. So hopefully this addresses the sun issue in ground forces. If it doesn't, then, you know, it is how it is. At the same time, one of the interesting things is that they've actually made the sun move from east to west, depending on the map that you're on, depending on the geographical latitude. So that's just a nice little, like realistic quality of life change. And I'm sure the Dagor engine overall will bring a lot of those changes, which we're looking for. The only questions right now about all that we've seen is how does this affect lower-end players? And for me personally, I have a PC that's going on 5 years old now, and it isn't in the best of shape. I will have to probably upgrade pretty soon with different parts, or maybe just a brand new rig, because there are definitely some issues with it. I can still right now run the game at 60 on movie, if I'm not recording. If I am recording, I can run the game 60 movie in planes, but I can't run it 60 movie in tanks. I can run it about 40 or 55, but on max I can still run it 60 as long as I'm not on a snow map. What we haven't seen from any of these things so far is how this affects snow. And that was one of the big things about the Dagor 4 engine. It really affected the FPS that people got on snow maps. Yes, it made snow look a hell of a lot better, but holy hell, did it cut into FPS hard. And I really hope that the Dagor engine won't do, the 5 version won't do that, but I'm sure it will in some areas. It's one of those things we're gonna have to see. One thing we know is that Gaijin is really cognizant of the player base when it comes to the rigs that they're using, trying to appeal to the biggest market possible with the minimum, low, medium, high, max, and movie settings. For me personally, I don't think there is a game out there which actually has as many settings for what I would call just basically like everyone. Actually, let's rephrase that better. So, this game has the most options when it comes to graphics of any game I've really run into, when it comes to whether you want to be on the low end, the medium end, or the high end. The only one that I would maybe say is different is Men of War Assault Squad 2, but that's pretty much because everything is customizable, where in War Thunder there are a few things which you can't. But yeah, overall, they are obviously very cognizant of that, so hopefully they stick to that. I don't want, after this update's 1.77 update, a lot of people who I play with just not being able to play the game anymore because of the improvements to the engine. I understand that, you know, we move on with what we have to do and all of that jazz, but it's just, it would be sad to see. At the same time, though, I think when we had the Dagor Engine 4 come out, we didn't have a lot of vehicles coming along with it. So something tells me that update 1.77 is not going to be a high vehicle update. So that's why we haven't seen a lot of devblogs for stuff like that. We've seen a lot of devblogs for the Dagor stuff, you know, we've seen 3 of them. So maybe temper expectations for updates 1.77 when it comes to new vehicles. Yes, I understand the Leopard 2K is coming out, but does that mean that we get other rank 6 stuff? Maybe. Maybe we get something for the British, maybe for the Americans. But for me, the Leopard 2K is not too different compared to what we already have in the game, so there wouldn't be a need for other nations to get anything new. So we'll have to see. I would temper expectations. That's the best way I would put it. When it comes to new vehicles in updates 1.77, just because we are getting a new engine, which generally takes up a lot of time and resources of any team creating it. But anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.